If you have ever looked at a website in plain text, you have seen HTML, and you probably know how HTML works. So you have an element, and it starts with an opening bracket, then there's the element name, then a closing bracket, then all the contents inside it, and then the same thing, except that there's a forward slash. But this is a lot to type, and it's very annoying, and so I don't use this, and I do web development mostly. So how this looks in my source code, so this main element right here, and the body and the head and whatnot, is like this. So here's the source code of my website. We have the body element, the main element, and you don't see any opening and closing ankle brackets anywhere, because again, that's kind of unnecessary syntax. And in this video I want to show you why, like how come I never use actual HTML, and why I instead use SXML, which is a XML replacement with S expressions, so with the parentheses, enclosed contents. Okay, so I will do this in chicken scheme. You can probably do this in other schemes as well. You just have to find the corresponding packages. And what I will use is the following chicken egg, and that's SXML serializer. And I think there are a few others, but SXML serializer worked the best for me. So I'll switch to my editor. The first thing you of course need to do is install the egg. So how you can do this is with chicken install SXML serializer, and you may need to specify the S flag or something like that. Or no, I think S flag goes before that. But yeah, so I just assume you have that installed. Import it. Then you get a bunch of output, and then you can call the serialized SXML procedure. And what I normally do is I pass HTML as a method because I want HTML and not XML. And I pass indent true because, well, sometimes I do that, but in this video I will do it for demonstration purposes. And of course you also need to pass the actual body. So the actual SXML you want to translate into HTML. And if I evaluate that, we get a string as an output, which is kind of cryptic because it includes new lines. So what we can of course do is wrap that in the display, and then we get nice output displayed. And what we can also do is wrap that in begin and call new line here and new line there, so we have nice clean output. Great, so this is the HTML that's generated from this SXML. And I mean, we don't have to discuss what's easier to type. Especially with something like Paraedit, this becomes really powerful. And of course, I know there are HTML editing modes. For example, also in Emacs there's a great mode. I don't remember what it's called, but it's for web development in general. And it will insert closing tags and all this kind of stuff. I know that's great. And it's fine. And I mean, I've used that in the past, but SXML is way better. But why? Because this is, you can either pass, so what you can do is just pass a like list literal, for example with the quote, and if you do that we get the same output of course. Oops. But you can also, as I have done, use this backtick, and now what you can do is you can insert scheme code in your SXML. For example, you can have something like this, or you can, let me think, what's a good example? I didn't think about this before. So, for example, if, I don't know, a equals 5, print out a is 5, else print out a is not 5. Trivial example, of course, and we can wrap this in a let and bind a to 4, for example. So, if we now do this and evaluate, we get this output, and a is not 5. Well, who would have thought? So what you can do is, by using this backtick, you can then use the comma to tell Scheme, well, okay, don't evaluate anything except this comma expression, so the expression after the comma, and then this gets evaluated as normal Scheme code. And you can do like anything with it. So you have a template language without having a template language, because the syntax you write your HTML with is the same syntax you program in. It's all S expressions. And this enables you to do like crazy things, well, not crazy things, but things that would otherwise take you like a lot of work. If you think of templating language, like for example, what's it called? The one in Flask and in I think Django has one as well. You know, these kind of templating languages, also Hugo, where you have like, where you have like these brackets, and then you have like this, maybe even this or something, and then some pseudo programming language where you can do some things and some things you can't, and well, you know, length is not implemented, so you have to kind of work around it, and you know, all this kind of stuff that's really limited because it's implemented as a separate thing. In this case, it's not a separate thing, it's scheme. And these are just scheme symbols. So this body, this h1, and so on and so forth, HTML. And you can, of course, have arbitrary symbols here, but because we're interested in writing HTML, of course, we will use HTML symbols, obviously. But if you have XML, if you want to write a special XML format, you can, of course, adapt this. So we could have feet here as well. And again, I mean, of course, HTML doesn't really understand feet, but I hope you get the point. So it will output feet. Like, it will just output whatever you give it. All right, now you might say, well, I mean, that's cool and all, but how can I, like, there's something missing. Because with normal HTML, you have, if I go back here and here, you have these, within these angle brackets, you can have something like class or style or lang, as in this case, and so on and so forth. And you might say, well, how do I do this here? And it's very easy. You do it with the second parameter. So these are all lists, of course. And if the second parameter is a list, so this is a list, and it starts with an @ it will be treated as the tag. So what we can do is we can write class, I don't know, hello, I don't know. Yeah, so, and if I now evaluate this, it will output all this again with the HTML tag having the class hello. Yeah, pretty simple. And if I look at my website again, you can also see this here. So the head has the class max w content width, mx auto, myl, and these are atomic CSS classes. And for example, this link has an href, so it has a class, but it also has a href like tag, which is set to the root, so the root of the website. And stuff like this. And I mean, in this real life example, it's even clearer how great this is, because you can have, again, so it's a templating language without having to implement an extra templating language. You can have string equals, you can have any scheme code, like any scheme code, like period, without having to do anything else. I mean, that's just, yeah, that's really super great. And I've worked with this a lot, and it's just super fun to write, and I mean, fun in quotes, but it's just a joy to work with compared to normal HTML. And I think, I mean, we can talk all day about like, well, when did technology like take a wrong turn? Well, I think this is like one of the major things where you kind of have to think, well, maybe as expression-based XML would have been better instead of, or what I mean with as expression-based XML, as expressions would have been better than XML, because XML is really just very noisy. Okay, I just finished recording the video, and I was kind of unhappy because I didn't show a complex example of using this de facto templating language. So I show you this here. So this is again my website, and this is the code I use to list all my articles on my website. So if I quickly go to that, articles, I have all of them listed here. So, and the way I do this is, okay, so I have a function and whatnot. So this is the actual interesting part for SXML. So I have a div with a class, and then I have a UL, so an unordered list. So yeah, an unordered list, and you can see that because there are, oh no, there are these markers here, right? And I style that with style, and then line height, and then this marker thing. And then I have a comma, and then I have a map which maps some stuff over another list. And you can already see, so from this point on, it's just Lisp code. Oh, well, not Lisp code. I mean, it's pretty much just Lisp code. So I map something over here, I sort something here, I filter something here, and then I'm here again, I have a map, and then this map. So what I'm de facto doing is, what I'm actually doing is I'm mapping over a directory. and you can see this down here. Here's the directory call. So, and this spits out all the files in this directory. Because I have a contents directory and an articles directory, and in there are different files I want to link. So first of all, I filter that for something, and then I map over that filtered list with this lambda, which first of all reads in the file, and then if there is an kind of draft tag, draft is Entwurf in German, it just skips it, so it outputs the empty list. And if not, it gives us back some SXML. And first up, okay, so this is not SXML, but this is. So here's the actual SXML. So it's a list item. So again, up here we have the unordered list, like wrapper element or parent element. And here we have the actual list items. And they have a class, of course, again, and then they have a link. And then they have a span with, and you can see there's like, this is like nested again. So first up we have this backtick, then we have this comma, then we have backtick again, then we have comma again. So, and you can nest this arbitrarily. And let me remove this line. So again, we have a list item, then a tag, then a link with, and here we call some scheme again, which just formats the path name. I don't know why I did it like that. Yeah, legacy code. And then inside that a tag, we have a span element, which again has a class, and then some, again, we call scheme to actually give us the title from this environment we read in earlier. So yeah, you can see a pretty complex example, and like I did some hacky thing where I like format the date differently so I can sort it better and stuff like that here. And I mean, that's not really relevant for this example, but I just wanted to show you a actual like real life example why SXML is great. I mean, try doing this with a template language. The template language would have to be programmed with something like this in mind. And SXML doesn't, because it just integrates so nicely with normal scheme code. So yeah, that's just a real life example I wanted to show you to give you an impression how great this actually is. Alright, so that's about converting SXML expressions, so these things, to HTML. We can also do the reverse, so pass HTML into S expressions or SXML. And how I do that is with the HTML parser. And this is another chicken egg. Again, you can install it by calling chicken install HTML parser. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. You just call HTML to SXML, and then you have to open a input string because it reads from an input. So you can also read from a file, for example. And I have just written out by hand, how painful, some HTML code here. And if I import that, and then evaluate that and go down here, we see, and we can, I guess, pretty print that like that. Pretty print is not installed. Let me, is not imported pretty print. Let's import that. So if I evaluate that, we will see the same thing. Okay, whatever. So we have a HTML and body tag here, and then the h1, but we also have this top thing here to indicate that that is the top expression. And this is, I think, for reasons that have to do with XML, because XML itself is you have a lot of options to do stuff in. So for example, one thing is namespaces, and I don't know about this. Like, I am not like knowledgeable about XML. So for example, with here we have like doc and s prefixes. So this is the SXML serializer and namespaces and whatnot. But this is of course not really relevant to HTML, but this is the reason this top thing exists, I think. And you can of course remove this by calling, for example, CDR, I guess. And that will remove it. Yeah, so, oh yeah, CDR, and then maybe also a car on that or something. So this is pretty ugly, but yeah, just to get the point across. So, and then you have XML. And with this, you can, of course, then operate on it and stuff like that. So this, for example, is useful. I use this in my static site generator when I first convert SXML into, which I write, into HTML. Then I concatenate it with some plain text markup, or markdown rather. And then I pipe that whole thing into Pandoc, which gives me back HTML. And then I pipe that HTML into HTML parser to get SXML again. And then I concatenate that with some other SXML and so on and so forth. Point being, there's very much a practical use case for all this stuff, or for this HTML parser thing. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I just wanted to kind of give you a quick introduction to SXML, because I think, like, for web development, it's like the best thing, I think. Especially if you're using some kind of scheme, of course. I mean, with outside the context of like Scheme and Lisp, this kind of makes no sense, of course. But I think this is what makes Scheme such a great programming language for web development. Yeah, it's just you have a template language built in. Yeah, so I think that's it. I think that's all I wanted to share in this video. And yeah, have a nice day.